Welcome to Something to Say, where we bring voices from diverse backgrounds who will share their unique stories and perspectives on finding their passion and provide insights on how you can find yours. Join us as host Greg DeShields guides us through this enlightening journey.
Welcome to Season 2 of Something to Say Podcasts, a unique platform that amplifies the voices of individuals from diverse backgrounds as they share their passions and purpose. I'm your host, Greg DeShields, and I'm thrilled to bring you another inspiring episode. Thank you for joining us. Today, we speak with Becky Large, the founder and executive director of Championautismnetwork and autismtravelclub, based in Surfside Beach, South Carolina. This location is recognized as the world's first autism-friendly travel destination. As an advocate, autism mom, and social entrepreneur, Becky has trained thousands of employees, created hundreds of sensory-friendly events, and established national partnerships that promote inclusive travel. Her work has been featured in the Emmy-nominated docuseries Traveling the Spectrum. Becky's efforts illustrate that autism inclusion is not just about advocacy, it is a powerful catalyst for community building, connection, and economic impact. Welcome, Becky. Wow, Becky, I cannot believe we're finally having this opportunity to speak. Thank you so much for joining us on Something to Say.
Well, thank you for, just giving, because it's been months, honestly. So thank you for, hanging in there in the pocket and giving me the opportunity. I'm thrilled to be here.
I think I'm going to put a little icon next to your podcast that says the longest planned podcast this season.
Okay, well, at least, I'm going down in history and, for some reason, I guess it could be worse, could be better, but okay, I'll take it.
Well, I'm really anxious to begin our conversation and take a deep dive into autism-friendly travel because it certainly has become a real necessity for families to be able to navigate how they move through going to various destinations and travel across the country. Also, I want to be able to extend my congratulations on you being featured in the Emmy-nominated documentary series Traveling the Spectrum. I think that's really a testament to your hard work. So congratulations for doing that.
Thank you.
Or you can share some of that while we're working our way through. So here's how we begin our conversations with Something to Say. It is really about an opportunity for our audience to get to know you. So we have a few icebreaker questions. We'll dive a little bit deeper into maybe some of the industry area, and then we'll speak more specifically to some of the things that are really near and dear to your heart. So if you're ready for that, launch the first icebreaker question. Ready?
Okay, yes.
All right. So what is your favorite childhood memory?
So we spent, grew up in southern New Jersey, and we spent the requisite week at the Jersey Shore. Ocean City was our go-to place, and my grandparents would run a place, and aunts and uncles and cousins and great aunts and uncles and cousins, would come down, and then we would also do it over Thanksgiving weekend, and we would stay in Stone Harbor. And there's nothing more wonderful than waking up with bedhead and breaking bread and drinking coffee with your aunties or uncles who traditionally aren't all that engaging, or just spending, like, living with them and celebrating whatever it was that we were celebrating, and just doing things together as an extended family. And they were really precious times, and I miss them. But that was like every year we would all get together like that twice a year, so it was wonderful.
As we ask that question and learn more about the individuals that we are interviewing, there's always these fond memories of family and the connectivity to a time when maybe things were a little bit more simpler, but more importantly, where you had that ability to connect with family that would create lasting memories. And, those lasting memories we've also found has been like the anchor to kind of help people navigate through life's challenges as they go up and down. So I'm glad you shared that. It's a really personal reflection. And I also want to thank you for doing a shout out to South Jersey. I mean, just to say that.
We got to do it. We miss it, but now we live at the beach in South Carolina. So, at least, which we would never have been able to do in New Jersey, right? It's a little bit more cost effective down here. So, yeah.
Very cool. All right, so our second question is what was your biggest failure and what did you really learn from that experience?
So it's interesting because biggest failure, maybe in my mind, it's like the most recent failure. I had kind of a surprise open heart surgery triple bypass in August of 24. And, I had no idea, that I was compromised in that regard. And I'm going to get a little bit misty eyed. I actually consider that a failure. It really impacted my family. It impacted my businesses. I'm reminded of it every day. The dietary restrictions and, the scars, physical and mental, I guess. And my husband said that it wasn't my fault, right? It's genetics, but I don't know. That to me has just impacted me, maybe not in the best way. My husband's grateful I'm alive. So, for him, that's a score. And
Mm.
I guess for all of us, it is. But anyway, in my mind, it's a failure, whether or not, real or perceived. So that was one.
But we asked that part about what you're able to learn from that. And I have to say, when you
Mhm.
shared your story, it was so impactful. As I was reading, I was kind of like stunned, but yet you were serving as such an inspiration for others to overcome
Yeah.
challenges. So I have to tell you that the way that you were able to provide that perspective in a variety of different ways, it probably inspired and motivated people to overcome challenges. And that I think is really priceless when you think about when you are faced with a challenge, how can you make something of that to maybe not just impact you, but impact others? So I
Well,
do.
I was reticent to share this surgery because I didn't want people to question my viability or that of the organizations, right? So, but then I was like, who am I serving, right? Anybody who has heart disease in their family, especially women who present so differently. I still had no idea. So anyway, I did want to share that, and it's really hard to share your
Mm,
failures because we all know that there's a couple big ones in the
mm,
background. I'm not saying anything about.
mm. But I will tell you that I will tell you that from those, you then tend to rise, and you certainly have, and you serve as an inspiration and motivation to others. So thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
that. All right, so I'm going to shift gears for you and make it a little bit more fun. So if you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would that be and why?
I had the opportunity to, know some of these questions, which is a good thing because off the cuff would have been tough. So, I said the first person who popped into my mind was Nelson Mandela. Growing up in the '80s, and the specials with their song "Free Nelson Mandela" and all this stuff. And then I was like, huh. And then I went on to the Dalai Lama, Gandhi, and then wound up with Jesus.
Mm,
And so, I think I would choose Jesus. All of those people are amazing because of their conviction and dedication to their cause and their mission to help people. But, you know, Jesus knew he was, you know, destined, he knew that he was destined for like a horrible demise, right? But he did it anyway, and I'm like, when I think of like, him carrying the cross on Palm Sunday and all that, and just like, like, how did you stay true to your mission? Because there's so many times when you are, and him especially, and all these other people, and are vilified for your beliefs, and who do you think you are, and how did you get over the imposter syndrome, kind of, like, these kind of type questions are really interesting to me because I want to support people. Also, I'm not saying I get vilified or anything, but like, how do you stay true to your mission and not get distracted by, I don't know, the shiny object,
mm,
or
mm,
like, or when it gets hard, when you just
mm.
want to just fall out and roll over. How do you keep going?
I think it's so interesting, that you would want to have dinner with Jesus. We've had a few people who've actually identified him, some for similar reasons, but some because they have such a deep spiritual faith that they want to further explore that, and have more of a conversation. But on the lighter side, one of the things we always want to know is like if you had dinner with him, what would you want to have for dinner?
Right. Okay. So, I don't think I'm all interested in the kind of wine that they had back then, but maybe, like, why not? Right. I'm sure that they made some fabulous flatbread, right? And like maybe some hummus or, like I think, just kind of really get into what they ate then, like really have a traditional, I don't know, AD meal. Yeah.
It's so interesting to think of what would be unfolding with that particular kind of experience, but I'm glad you were able to share that. Maybe taking it from another turn to talk more about you. How big is your inner circle?
It's really not that big. It really isn't, and I think a lot of that has to do with autism really does it takes a lot of time and effort and energy. So finding those people who get it and understand. So really, I just have a couple close women friends, which, still not a ton. And, I think that, of course, my family. So it's not a giant inner circle, but it's one that when I call on, they're there. God bless them.
Well, it's interesting as we ask that question, we often get the insights of a smaller inner circle is really quite powerful because, they are the ones who are most honest and most transparent with you in terms of their point of view. But we've also had some people who've called it instead of their inner circle, they call it their front row. And I actually like that part of it.
Oh, that's kind of fun.
Yeah, they have that observation of you and how you perform in your stage of life. So that was something I thought was kind of fun to pass on. So front row.
Stage of life. Yes.
So who has had the most influence in your life?
My husband and my parents.
Mm.
Hmm. For
And in what
sure.
way were they most influential?
My husband is an attorney, but I call him a counselor at law because he is an amazing counselor, right? And he just has a way he listens and distills information and comes back and can be when he has his counselor hat on, not necessarily the emotional husband side, right? Because he can be highly emotional. But when he's got his counselor hat on, he is remarkable. And then, my father, was really pivotal in helping develop the direct mail industry that started in Philadelphia back in the 70s. And I learned so much from him, kind of about marketing and different things like that. And besides the fact of but just being a good human, one of the things he always taught me was, don't burn bridges and sell the sizzle, not the steak.
Huh?
So trying to do that. So that was good. And then my mother was just, like a diehard, always wanting to learn. She went to GW when I was a freshman in college so that she could further her education. And she went to live in DC for a year. And then after that, she came home and worked full time and went to school at night to get her master's degree at Gwynedd Mercy. So it's like highly motivated, always more to learn and just don't ever stop. So it's just been those three people have been amazing.
That's great how you're able to pull them all together and share them collectively.
They're kind
You
of stuck with me.
I asked you a question about your failure, and I
Mm-hmm.
think maybe we have a sense of this, but when was the best year of your life? And then really, what was the worst year of your life? And I think I probably have an idea of the second part, but what about that first?
Mm-hmm. So probably it's like almost an unfair question, because there's so many things. So it was like, in 2000 I got married. In 2003 I had my first son. In 2005 I had my second son. So like those were all really amazing years for different things. But I think probably 2000 was really fun because it was like, BK before kids.
Mhm.
And, we bought this really great house. It was a 400-year-old farmhouse and just really, really fun and exciting. Worst year, we mentioned 2024 was really, besides I call it my cardiac kerfuffle in August, the nonprofit had been really suffering, of course, since COVID.
Mhm.
And we had to have a reduction in force in January of 2024, which was painful and really changed the landscape of both companies also. And then the cardiac kerfuffle didn't help anything. So, and the depression that ensues apparently after you have open heart surgery, I guess you really truly have a broken heart. So it was just a really challenging year.
And the way that we kind of balance our good years and our bad years, help us continue to move forward and hopefully make sure we have more of those good years. But we also know that we can work through those bad years when they come our way. And
I'm
like I
still
said,
standing.
yeah,
Yeah,
but I
it's-
still have to say you have served as such an inspiration. So just kudos
Thank
to you
you.
for that because there are a lot of people who thank you for the message that you shared. But let's talk industry, travel and also, autism. So can you talk about some of the common misconceptions that are out there that you'd like to clear up?
So, kind of like epilepsy or things like that, autism is a disorder. It's a neurological disorder. And there's, don't know that there can really be a cure. Some of the misconceptions are that it's coming from, uh, Tylenol or immunizations, which, you know, me as a professional, I don't focus on that necessarily because, we serve people regardless of how you got here. And I think one of the things is it might not even be, besides the fact that autism is a neurological disorder, it's also a lifestyle, right? And like, because autism affects, the person with autism, it affects how they react to the world, and not just sensory wise, but also they have these gut issues, they've got diet issues, they've got sleep issues. So like their rhythms and family rhythms of, supporting people with autism are drastically different than traditional, neurotypical families. They just are, so uh, knowing more about the support that the families need, the people and families need because of this disorder that trickles down to impact the lifestyle is really important.
Mm. I didn't send it to you as an earlier question, but I thought as you've kind of described the understanding of it, can you talk a little bit about what it means to be a child who has autism and perhaps a teenager and then ultimately an adult? Because
Okay.
they experience autism differently.
hmm Well, obviously when you're a child, you're being carted around and, working on skills to get along. You've got a lot of support in school. And of course there's still bullying and things like that, but that really doesn't come into play until you get to like middle and high school, where the executive level cognitive deficits become more glaring because they learn so differently. Like I say, how do you eat an elephant? We say as neurotypicals, one bite at a time. And we know where to start, like say on the big toe. But the person with autism, they learn so differently that, when you present to them like a report or whatever, with the rubric,
Mm.
it's kind of lost on them, and they're looking at it, the elephant, as the whole thing, and they don't even know where to start. Many people with autism don't even know how to ask for help. And then when you get into the different therapies, my son's still upset that he got pulled out of class often for different therapies, social, speech, and these different things, and made him highly uncomfortable. So you've got these, and then you still have the social deficits, right? Trying to get a job, like it's incredible. My son is now 22, watching him through the lifespan and what challenges have been. We were talking the other day about him learning communication. He was like, I thought I was delivering something funny
Mm.
when in fact it was, like people's jaws dropped. And that's how that's how I learned that like I was being socially inappropriate.
Mhm.
And then as an adult, like the challenges with socialization, I get calls all the time about, even parents with children, but in their mid 40s who, have autism, don't have any kind of social network, have difficulty finding work. 85% of people with autism are unemployed or underemployed. It's amazing, and it's definitely through the lifespan, and there's just not enough knowledge or support for the community.
Wow. Well, I thank you so much for taking that deeper dive into it because it helps to provide people a way to kind of begin to put some common knowledge around it. And certainly not to look at it as if it's just linear because it certainly does change. So I wanted to talk to you about the integration of innovation and technology. How have you seen that really impact the autistic community or helping them in the world of travel? What has been your thoughts about that? And is there something that's really exciting for you that you've seen?
So like it's been since COVID. I feel like the people with autism were probably the happiest during COVID because they didn't have to leave the house, and a lot of it was video and less human interaction. And now it seems like it's an epidemic where they don't want to leave the house or their bedrooms or get their face out of their phones. So as wonderful as technology is, at least for the higher functioning people, with the lower functioning people, there's been some wonderful technological advancements, different devices and communication opportunities and apps and all these different things to help with to support them with their deficits or whatever, to provide them also with, fun opportunities with people here, there, and everywhere, right? Because like you think of Minecraft or Artcraft, and you can get online and I play with people from all over. So that's been really fun and wonderful. And as far as advancements go, through COVID, everybody learned how to learn virtually. So that I think, you know, from an extension of people with autism, but the world, there's more opportunity, a broader reach for organizations that want to serve and support, whether technological companies that want to do that for our community.
During the course of the summer, I was in Hudson Valley in New York, and it was a workforce development program. And we were emphasizing the integration of artificial intelligence and innovation, but it spoke specifically to providing support from a workforce development point of view for people with autism. So there was a panel of individuals who had autism, and they were using the various devices in order to respond to questions and share their insights and their thought. And it was absolutely amazing. And there was a mother of two twins who had autism, and they were using the device where they could spell out the letters, but they did their self introduction and they were able to engage in the conversation. And it was amazing to see how the integration of technology and I'm thinking from a tourism and hospitality perspective, they were able to
Yeah.
participate and conduct their own panel and engage in
Hmm.
their own self-introduction. So that was pretty eye-opening for me to see to see
If you just think about like somebody even 10, 20, 30 years ago, or, I don't know, 50, where, they have something to say, but no means of saying it,
Hmm,
right? Like no means of communicating it. And so it is kind of remarkable now what technology offers
mhm.
them. They can have like something speak with and for them.
Wow. There was a parent whose daughter was using a tablet, but she's actually part of an advisory group for the state in New York that's focusing on creating more innovative technology for individuals to help their communication capability. So, in this particular case, and I was really excited about bringing this question forward in this interview because often from a medication people perspective, people may think that that's how you approach it, but there's all these fantastic ways to help people express their thoughts and communicate with others. So that was quite a memorable experience for me.
I want to go next year. Like,
I'll
I
make
wish I'd been
sure
there.
I'll send you an invitation to it.
All
I,
right.
I want to go a little bit deeper. So, why is accessible travel for families with autism such a personal cause for you?
So, started this whole supporting families with autism thing back in 2013. And then in 2015, my in laws decided, wanted to take us for a 2-week vacation in Hawaii, all expenses paid, yay them, and for their 50th wedding anniversary. And it was just not no bueno, really. And then this is where I learned there where paradise is more than just a pretty place, right? Like I much prefer home. So it was, from the family not being understanding and aware at that point in time. It took some time beyond that, and being judged and my children being reprimanded. And then, not knowing where to go, like, the resort, calling them all the time, asking them about specifics about
Mm.
the layout of the condo, right? How many bedrooms, what size are the beds so that we could all get that, and like if they had activities, were they in the shade, inside, outside, blah, 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 because it's kind of like our people are like Princess and the Pea. So you, coming back from that, I just was, kind of hell bent on supporting families like mine. And it was really important for me to do that. So when I came back, I was on the Surfside Beach Business Council, and we had already started this training program for restaurants. And I was like, we live in this tourist destination. Why don't we take what I've learned and like have Surfside Beach declared the first autism-friendly travel destination anywhere in the world? So we did that in 2016, and we've just been off and running ever since, and just trying to support, get our program's pretty robust. We have if you're going to invite the autism world to come out and play, the people around you need to know who are coming out to play. So we have speaking engagements and public service announcements. And then we train the hospitality industry and other businesses on the needs and accommodations of our families so that they can come out with confidence and have a traditional family experience modified for those with autism, whether it's a movie or a vacation.
I think as we look at how competitive the tourism and hospitality industry is, and always trying to create new markets and opportunity for business growth, I think the work that you've done to provide more insight how hospitality establishments can be much more service oriented may create a whole new market of opportunity around securing new customers than they would have ever even thought of.
Right. And that's the goal, right? Economic impact. That's the flip side of the coin
Right.
is, we want it to be good for everybody.
Mhm. So, what kind of feedback did you receive from some of the families that you worked with? Is there any particular story that stood out or has stayed with you?
There's a couple, like people come down here and they just want to take it home with them, which is fun. So we've kind of
Mm.
developed a program to be able to do that or try to do that. One was, a woman came down here and she was waiting in line at the movie concessions, and her son was really acting out and kind of freaking out, waiting in line because they don't like to wait in line. But the person behind them or in front of them
Mhm.
paid for their concessions, and we're like, it's okay. We get it. It's all good. So that meant something. And then the other thing is that when people contact me because they've decided to go stay at a resort or a hotel that does not, cater to people with
Mm.
autism. And I'm like, well, you made your choice. Like they wouldn't let my son do whatever in the lazy river on a tube. And I was like, you know, I'm sorry, but I can contact them, but I'm not going to be able to change their mind while you're here.
Mhm.
That's why, like you need to go somewhere who's aware. So it's those kind of stories stick in my brain because I just know how much more there is to do.
Mm. But, I think one of the things that you've done is help to create a way for there to be more communication shared from families as they travel with what
Hmm.
can be done by industry, especially if industry maybe doesn't have the capability to, conceptualize it on their own, but that
Hmm.
feedback that you get helps to make a bigger impact than that. You work in such an incredibly emotionally charged environment because for some families, they experience it firsthand when they least expect it after probably from the minute they left from their house, they had the biggest knot in their stomach about anything that could happen. What really frustrates you in this type of work?
There's a couple things, I guess people who think, getting involved in this whole program and it's a great idea, love it, and then never follow through, which is, that's a little bit frustrating because it's not hard and we keep it cost effective and like it's easy. So I'm like, what up, people? Right. So like, and the slow adoption, because, like, all, autism is a hot button, especially these days. So everybody's, talking about it, but, like, what are they doing? So that frustrates me. Um, and then, it's, there's always more to do, I guess. And I want to do more. And then, autism can be frustrating, right? They have a different way of communicating and assimilating information and trying to figure out a way to phrase it, even as a parent, like how can I say this in a way that will sink in, and then, help to provide this person with life skills and things like that. So that's a bit frustrating.
Mm. And while we did talk about frustration, there's probably parts of this work that just excite you. So, and I'm assuming that's when you see a happy family having a great time. But
Oh, well, that's epic. Yeah, I get to go to I get to go to the events. I plan quiet parties for a living, I say. So, it's like I get to go to events and see happy families. And then in our trainings, we have a pre and post survey, kind of to, prove efficacy, right? That what we're doing works. And, I just recently delivered training to first responders up in the Laurel Highlands region, east of Pittsburgh. And it's really awesome to see the surveys and see the needle move and then being, like, why isn't this mandatory for everybody? And, because it doesn't take a lot. It doesn't take a lot, which is great. So I guess what excites me is that there's opportunity everywhere.
You know, I have to give you another acknowledgement. Thanks for the shout out for Laurel Highlands. I did a presentation out there, and they are the most amazing people in terms of how they really want to ensure that they are being as innovative, as
Hmm.
creative, as welcoming as they can possibly be in what we know is a very competitive market. So I'm glad to see that you had a chance to go out there because they're very cool.
Well, they're one of our new markets, right? Them in Kissimmee, Florida, and the team at Go Laurel Highlands, and an amazing, like just amazing area, as 3,000 square miles. Like, holy cow, there's so much to do. So yeah, just feel blessed to be a part of that and grow with them.
So, as we begin to wind down our questions, and we have probably one more really cool question because it's how we always end our podcast. But we've talked about some of the personal challenges that you've had and certainly some of the professional as it relates to the complicated, business environment that's out there. But how have those experiences really shaped the way you continue to pursue your mission? And the podcast is about that passion that people have that helps them through their personal and their professional life. But how have those experiences shaped you and how you pursue your mission?
Well, certainly it has morphed, as you grow and age and, different business climates and opportunities. I have to say that, COVID was crazy. We're still nobody knows the real effects, social, like economically, whatever, it's just like crazy. That certainly shifted the focus a lot. But, as things are changing in my personal life, it's shifting goals. Like, I had a goal of, getting an RV wrapped in ATC and traveling around the country.
Mm,
But now my husband's going to be a partner in his law firm. So like we are firmly planted here, which
mm,
is fine. So like, it's just kind of shifting the focus. It's like, okay, how are we going to do that? And then we really thought ATC would be able to scale much more quickly, which is, I talked to you about my
mm,
frustration with that is, trying to figure out. So that's not happening in the manner that we thought. So taking a step back.
mm,
Okay, what can we do? How are we going to grow this? Because it's an important topic. And like I said, it's easy to do, it's
mm,
cost effective, and like really want to get out there. And so that's one of the things. So kind of just
mm,
reviewing my personal and professional goals and how it fits into my family's goals
mm.
is
You
pretty
did.
much where we are right now with the mission.
That leading a organization and kind of navigating the tumultuous waters that kind of flow back and forth through it. It was interesting over the weekend when I was in Washington, and there was a gentleman who just opened a hotel. And, he was telling the story about the hotel and how beautiful it is. Da, 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 da. So someone asked him the backstory behind it. And he said, I've been working on this deal for 11 years. And that ability to finally get to that particular point just took that amount of time. So I think, similar in your particular case, this is work that's long term. Through that, do have to kind of navigate the ups and downs. But as we kind of conclude our conversation, one of the questions that we love to ask is our concluding question. And because we are entitled Something to Say, we love to ask our guests, what do you have to say?
So I think what I have to say is kind of like the shock and of what is going on right now. I'm constantly saying I like to practice and preach non-judgment and leading with love. And I am consistently horrified at the number of people who are not doing that. It's been really difficult for me, but all I can do is I call it flying under the radar and just do what I do. I wake up every day trying to figure out how to serve people and families living with autism. So
Mm.
if I focus on that, I'm good to go. But something to say is like, let's all lead with love, right? It's not rocket science. So real quick, there's this little poem, Let Me Give. I do not know how long I'll live, but while I live, Lord, let me give some comfort to someone in need by smile or nod, kind word or deed. And let me do whatever I can to ease things for my fellow man. I want not but to do my part to lift a tired or weary heart, to change folks' frowns to smiles again. Then I will not have lived in vain, and I'll not care how long I'll live if I can give and give and give.
Wow. Becky, thank you so much for delivering that. That is so powerful, but that is so indicative of you. You tend to find a way to speak the truth in a way that allows for people to feel very uplifted. And that was a very positive message to kind of end. So I thank you so much for sharing your passion and your insights and your words. They're truly informative. And I think will, as I know they probably will, inspire people as we go forward. So it has been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
So, audience, that's a wrap for this episode of Something to Say podcast. And we encourage you to stay tuned for more inspirational conversations from voices of individuals from diverse backgrounds sharing their passion. So, until next time, this is Greg DeShields.
Thank you for tuning in to Something to Say. We trust you found some valuable insights and takeaways that can help you find your passion. Don't miss out on future episodes. Please subscribe, rate, and review us on your preferred platform. We value your feedback and suggestions, so let us know how we can serve you better. Keep the conversation going and stay inspired until we meet again. Take care and happy listening.